Ever feel like you're juggling chainsaws while trying to walk a tightrope,
Oh, yeah.
all while like trying to lead a team
Yeah.
and hit some moving target?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it turns out that's pretty common for managers, especially those kind of in the middle of the pack.
Right.
And we're diving into a guide today all about this.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating a growth mindset in leadership. And whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting to think about your management style, I think you're going to find some seriously valuable stuff here.
What's so interesting about this particular guide is that it really nails that feeling. So many of us in leadership roles experience that constant pressure to execute, often with like resources stretched thinner than a yoga teacher's patience.
Okay, I feel that, and no matter where you sit on the org chart, we've all felt that pressure cooker feeling of needing to deliver with limited resources.
Exactly. And it's not just about limited resources. It's also about navigating the expectations coming from all angles.
Yeah.
Your bosses might have one vision, your team might have another, and you're stuck in the middle trying to make it all work.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a rocket while it's already in flight, as this guide so aptly puts it.
Right. And that analogy perfectly captures the need for a growth mindset, which is really the heart and soul of what this guide is all about.
So for anyone who's new to this whole growth mindset thing, how would you define it?
At its core, a growth mindset is the belief that your abilities aren't set in stone. You know,
Yeah.
it's the understanding that you can constantly evolve, learn new things, and become more skilled through dedication and effort.
So it's not just some fluffy self-help buzzword, there's real substance to it.
Absolutely. It's about fundamentally shifting how you view challenges and setbacks. Instead of seeing a roadblock as a dead end, you learn to see it as a detour and opportunity for growth.
Mm.
It's about replacing I can't do this with I can't do this yet.
Okay, I'm hearing you on the I can't do this yet. But how do we actually shift from like doom and gloom to bring on the detours? Because let's be real, we're all busy.
Right.
Our listeners are out there juggling deadlines, managing teams, probably trying to squeeze in a workout or two.
You're preaching to the choir here. We need actionable advice, not just inspirational posters.
Right. So what concrete steps can our listeners take to start cultivating a growth mindset?
This guide really shines when it comes to actionable tactics. The first one they highlight is learning to embrace challenges. Remember that rocket analogy. Imagine trying to keep that thing on course. Your first instinct might be to panic when something goes off script,
Yeah.
but a growth mindset helps you see that unexpected engine sputter as a learning opportunity.
Instead of thinking this project is a disaster, you ask, what can we learn from this hiccup? How can we adapt and improve?
Precisely. It's about asking yourself, what can I learn from this situation? How can I use this experience to grow? Think of a recent challenge you faced as a manager. How might a growth mindset have shifted your approach? For example, I remember when I was asked to lead a team whose work I wasn't very familiar with. My initial thought was, what have I gotten myself into?
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. So what did you do?
Well, I took a deep breath and decided to see it as a crash course in a new area. I made it a point to ask a lot of questions, learn from my team's expertise, and even take some online courses to get up to speed. It was uncomfortable at times, sure, but I ended up expanding my skill set and gaining a whole new perspective.
That's a perfect example of turning a potential freak-out moment into a growth opportunity. But it's not just about tackling challenges head-on, is it? This guide also talks about the importance of continuous learning, and I think that can feel overwhelming, especially for busy managers.
Absolutely, a growth mindset thrives on curiosity, but it doesn't have to mean adding another degree to your already packed resume. This guide suggests something much more manageable, dedicating just 30 minutes each week to learning something new.
Okay, 30 minutes. Now that feels doable.
Right. And the beauty is it can be anything that sparks your curiosity and helps you grow professionally. Reading an industry article, listening to a podcast, maybe even having a coffee chat with someone in a different department, it all counts.
So it's about staying curious
Oh.
and creating that habit of seeking out new information and perspectives. What else does the guide recommend?
Another crucial piece of the growth mindset puzzle is reframing feedback. Instead of seeing it as criticism, you need to start viewing it as valuable data. This one can be tough, I know.
Oh, tell me about it. Feedback, even when it's given constructively, can sometimes feel like a punch to the gut.
It absolutely can.
Hmm.
Our brains are wired to avoid anything that feels like a threat. And feedback, even positive feedback, can trigger that fight or flight response.
So how do we move past that knee-jerk reaction and actually use feedback as a tool for growth?
One technique this guide suggests is active listening. When you're receiving feedback, instead of getting defensive or immediately jumping in to explain yourself, Try asking clarifying questions. Make sure you truly understand the other person's perspective.
So instead of saying, no, you're wrong, I did this, it's more about saying, can you give me a specific example of what you mean? Or what would you suggest I do differently next time?
Exactly. Those types of questions show that you're open to hearing the feedback and that you're genuinely interested in using it to improve. It shifts the conversation from a potential confrontation to a collaborative learning experience.
Okay, I'm all about making feedback less scary. What else does this guide have in store for us?
This next one is all about getting comfortable with a little bit of discomfort. Calculated risk-taking. And before you jump out of your chair, I want to emphasize the word calculated here.
We're not advocating for throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Not at all. This is about stepping outside of your comfort zone strategically. It's about identifying areas where you can experiment and innovate without putting the entire organization at risk.
So, how can our listeners approach this calculated risk taking in a way that feels manageable and, dare I say, exciting?
The guide suggests a really practical exercise.
Huh.
Think of a process within your team or department that could be improved. Then brainstorm 3 potential solutions. And don't be afraid to get a little creative here.
Even if it means challenging the status quo or trying something radically different?
Exactly. Once you have those 3 potential solutions, choose one to implement as a small-scale experiment. The key here is to start small, gather data, and see what you learn.
It's that whole test and learn approach that we've seen be so successful in fast-paced industries. But it's not enough to just talk about taking risks and experimenting, right? Leaders need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And that's where creating a learning environment comes in.
You hit the nail on the head as a leader. The tone you set, the behaviors you model, they have a ripple effect on your entire team.
It's like that saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have the most innovative ideas, but if your team culture doesn't support experimentation and growth, those ideas will never see the light of day.
Couldn't have said it better myself. When leaders embrace a growth mindset, it gives their teams permission to do the same. It creates psychological safety, which is essential for innovation, and honestly, just a more enjoyable work experience.
So creating that safe space for experimentation, for learning from those inevitable missteps, that's key. I'm curious, though, this guide we're diving into mentions some real-world companies that are nailing this whole growth mindset thing.
They do, and these aren't just your scrappy startups. We're talking big-name players like Microsoft.
Yeah.
Apparently, when Satya Nadella took over as CEO, he made a conscious effort to shift the company culture from know-it-all to learn-it-all.
That's a pretty bold move for a company as established as Microsoft. How did that actually play out?
Well, think about their massive success with cloud computing. They went from being almost entirely PC-focused to becoming a major force in the cloud space. That kind of transformation requires a willingness to embrace new ideas, even if it means disrupting your own business model.
It's like that old saying, innovate or die. But it's not just about survival, is it? Companies with growth mindsets, they're not just keeping up, they're often leading the pack. This guide also mentioned Google.
Right, Google's famous for its 20% time policy, where employees get dedicated time to work on passion projects. It sounds counterintuitive, almost like goofing off, but it's led to some of their most successful products like Gmail and Google Maps.
That's amazing. Just imagine what innovations your team could unlock with a little dedicated space for experimentation, just like Google's 20% time. Okay, so we've got Microsoft embracing the learn-it-all mentality, Google giving employees freedom to explore. What was the third company example?
The guide highlights Pixar, the animation studio. They're known for creating some of the most beloved animated films ever. And their success is deeply rooted in a culture that views mistakes as learning opportunities. They actually encourage their animators to experiment, even if it means things don't go exactly according to plan.
It's that whole fail fast, learn fast approach. And it makes sense when you create a culture where people aren't terrified of making a mistake. You open the door to incredible creativity and innovation.
Exactly. And while these company examples are inspiring, we have to acknowledge that shifting to a growth mindset, whether individually or as an organization, isn't always easy. This guide doesn't shy away from that reality. It points out that there will be roadblocks.
Especially when it comes to our teams, right? What
Yeah.
if you have team members who are resistant to change or who are stuck in their ways?
The guide's advice is to address those potential roadblocks head-on, acknowledge that change can be challenging, and emphasize that cultivating a growth mindset is a process, not a switch you flip overnight.
It's about bringing those potential roadblocks to light, having open conversations about them, and working together to find solutions. But how do you actually know if it's working? How do you measure the success of a growth mindset beyond just hitting financial targets?
Such a good question. While those financial metrics are obviously important, they don't tell the whole story. This guide suggests looking for other indicators: increased employee engagement, a surge in innovative ideas from your team, better problem-solving, smoother collaboration across departments, and even higher retention rates.
So it's about paying attention to those positive shifts in your team's dynamics and their overall approach to work. It's about noticing those aha moments and celebrating the small wins along the way.
Exactly. When you see your team embracing challenges, actively seeking out learning opportunities, and giving each other constructive feedback, that's when you know you're really onto something special.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've gone from unpacking the what and the why of a growth mindset, especially for leaders navigating today's anything but predictable world, to exploring practical tactics we can all use, like how do we actually implement this stuff?
Right. It's not just theory.
We've talked about reframing challenges as learning opportunities, the power of continuous learning, even if it's just 30 minutes a week, and how to shift our perspective on feedback from something scary to something valuable.
Mm.
We even got a glimpse of how companies like Microsoft, Google, and Pixar have embedded a growth mindset into their DNA.
And how those companies are crushing it, by the way.
Exactly. And the biggest takeaway for me is this. Adopting a growth mindset is an ongoing journey, not a destination. It's about constantly evolving, learning, and adapting as leaders and as humans, frankly.
So, as you navigate your week, think about this. If you could choose just one growth mindset indicator to focus on, just one to really champion with your team, which one do you think would have the biggest ripple effect? And what's one small step you can take this week to move in that direction?